Welcome to the Becoming Whole podcast, where we help men, women, and families learn and live God's good, holy, and beautiful design for sexuality. I'm your host, Josh Glazer, and we're glad you're here. You ready? Let's dive in. I know God is forgiving, but is he really going to forgive me again after I've asked him so many times and I keep going back to the same sin over and over again? This question is a theological one, but it's also a heartfelt one that I think a lot of us experience. I know in the years that I wrestled with sexual sin, there were so many times that I just had a hard time believing, not in my head, but in my heart, in my gut, that God would really forgive me again, especially in light of the fact that this was nowhere near the first time. I had done this over and over and over again. I had looked at porn again and again and again. I had masturbated again and again and again. This was something I'd return to over and over, even after I'd asked God for forgiveness, even after I promised him I wouldn't do it anymore, even after I promised that I would do better, even after I knew how to do better. And I kept going back to these things. So the idea that God would forgive me again just seemed, well, it seemed unlikely. It didn't make sense. And I think as I reflected on it, some of what was happening for me at that time was, it was hard for me to separate how angry I felt at myself, how frustrated I felt about my own condition, and how God felt about me. I was frustrated that I was going back to those old behaviors over and over and over again. I was frustrated that I was doing things that I felt ashamed about, that I was, in essence, treating myself this way and treating others inappropriately after, even when I knew better. So how could God not be frustrated with me, given that he's perfect and I'm the one doing it, given that he's holy and I'm the one who's not, given the fact that he can do better, that he has made a way for me to do better, given that he went to the cross for me and gave me his Holy Spirit so that I could do better. How could he have mercy on me? How could he be gracious towards me, even when I felt like I didn't deserve it? Does that make sense? Can you relate? Now, maybe for you, it's not overtly sexual stuff. I know for me, there are other areas, certainly the way that I lose my temper with my kids, the way that I procrastinate on things that I want to do better on, the way that I lose myself to my screens, the ways that I dive into food. So I know that this is not unique to those of us who have wrestled with sexual sin or who do wrestle with sexual sin. But I think for those who do wrestle with sexual sin, it has a specific kind of poignancy to it because we're sinning in our bodies. We're sinning against our bodies. And there's something unique about the way that kind of sits in us, with us, on us. Paul says something about this in 1 Corinthians 6 when he says, every other sin you do is outside the body, but he who sins sexually sins against his own body. And I don't claim to understand fully what that means, but I do just experientially, I can say that there's something about sexual sin that seems to kind of just sit on us in a heavier way, a way that shames us more. So I think we have two responses typically when we feel frustrated with ourselves or when we're wrestling with some type of sin over and over and over again. Two typical responses in relationship to God. One is that we start to downplay the seriousness of what we've done. And we may do this in one of a couple ways. We may justify it kind of like everybody does this. It's not that big a deal, or at least it wasn't, doing this and this and that. It was only this. The other thing I think we can do is we can say, well, God forgives me anyway. And so we kind of spiritualize it and just kind of paint over it with this kind of spiritual veneer of like, well, God, God forgives. He knows I'm only human, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's really an attempt to avoid the significance of what we've done and to avoid our own fears and our own difficulty receiving God's forgiveness. And I know that sounds ironic. How can just kind of assuming that God forgives me and painting, just kind of painting over with a broad brush, how can that be avoiding it? Isn't that accepting God's grace? Isn't that accepting his mercy and forgiveness? And I'd suggest, I don't know that it is. And I think you'll understand more as you listen on. The other direction we can go as we wrestle with God's forgiveness, wrestle to receive it, is a subtle kind of turn on grace, where we approach God for grace, we approach him for his mercy and forgiveness, but we do it in such a way that tries to lift us up and make us worthy in some way of receiving God's mercy. Hey friends, if you have something we should be talking about on the show, let us know. Send us an email at podcast@regenerationministries.org. In the meantime, please be sure to review, rate, subscribe, and share this podcast. Now back to the show. I know as I listen to men and women confess sin, come in and share with me how they're doing, and in some of our support groups or programs or one-to-one coaching, when somebody's specifically trying to overcome habitual unwanted sexual behavior, part of what we'll do in a coaching session or in a group is have a time of just check in. Tell me, how's that been going for you? It's not all we talk about, but it's one thing. Just how's the last week or two been in regards to your own sexual acting out? Tell me about the victories and tell me about any temptations and falls. And when people talk about their falls, they often kind of put almost a protective coating around them, either to make them sound not as bad or to explain what happened. And let me just take a kind of a sidestep here that might be helpful for some of you too. One of the things that we find so helpful in helping people overcome unwanted sexual behavior is to help them dig under the surface as to what they were really looking for and what prompted the acting out behavior. And so for a lot of us, it just seems to come out of nowhere, just, hit me out of the blue. I was tempted, and so I acted out. But the truth is, when you begin to pay attention to the deeper waters of your soul, acting out sexually, moving towards any kind of sin is really seeking to repair something, seeking to medicate something, seeking to reverse something that we've experienced. And this podcast is not about that, so I won't go into it. But even as we begin to understand that, so a simple example a lot of people can understand is I was feeling stressed, and so I acted out sexually, and it helped me feel more relaxed. That's a very basic one, but I think you can relate. And so when someone can confess, one of the ways they try to kind of prop themselves up and feel a little bit more worthy of forgiveness is by talking about how stressed they were. This is why I did it. That's a helpful thing to understand as you're seeking to move away from it, but it's not a helpful thing in regards to confession. All of these attempts are our way of trying to mitigate in some way, to reduce in some way the severity of what we've done, or to raise us up to be more worthy. And whether we're trying to reduce the severity of what we've done or raise ourselves up to be more worthy, the end goal is to try to get more of God's forgiveness, mercy, grace, and love. But the problem with that, either of those approaches, is that when we do that, we're actually shutting ourselves down from receiving more of God's grace, mercy, forgiveness, and love. We're actually posturing ourselves to be able to receive less of what we need most and what we desire most in those moments from God. And here's why. God's gifts to us, his gifts of grace, his gifts of mercy, his gifts of forgiveness, his gifts of love, are gifts. And when we try to lower our need, or we try to elevate our worth, we are in essence trying to earn a gift. And a gift by definition cannot be earned. If God only gives gifts, does not provide what we need based on what we're earning, but rather based on what he has provided for us through the cross and resurrection of Jesus. If we are saved by grace through faith and not by our works, as Paul puts it in Romans, then that means that the only way to receive God's grace, mercy, forgiveness, and love is as gift. And the reality of when we try to decrease the severity of what we've done or increase our worthiness is it's our expression of the fact that we do not trust the gift and we do not trust the gift giver. We believe and we attribute to the gift giver and to the gift that it's not going to come to me if what I've done is so bad and I don't deserve the gift. When we are living in those things and posturing ourselves that way, we don't open the gift. We don't receive the gift. We're looking for a price tag. We're looking for ways that we can pay back. I remember years ago coming to a mentor of mine who was helping me overcome unwanted sexual behaviors. And he was listening to me share, and he said, Josh, why don't we go to a time of confession and just tell Jesus what you've done. Just confess to him. And so I started praying and pouring out my heart, and in those subtle ways, saying things that were me trying to convince God to forgive me. Lord, I want to do better. Forgive me for this. I know that I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm so sorry for what I've done. I will do better. I'm going to work on this. All these kind of things to try to kind of convince God to forgive me. And my mentor, God bless him, he stopped me. And it was actually kind of abrupt. It shocked me when he did it. So I'm in the middle of praying and he just says, Josh, stop. Tell God what you did. In essence, he was saying, just remove the commentary. Tell God what you did. And so I recognized what he was doing, and I began just to state my sins plainly before the Lord. And it was exposing. It was vulnerable because I felt in front of the Lord. I felt without adding anything or trying to make myself feel better in any way. I felt like, man, I felt the significance and the truth that I do not deserve what I'm asking for right now. Lord, I knew better, and I opened up the browser on my computer. I looked at pornography, and I lusted after women that you've created. And you love them and know them, but I lusted after them. I treated them as objects for my sexual gratification. And Lord, I did this and this and this. And I just kind of walked through it, not beating myself up, not self-flagellation, because again, that's a way of trying to earn something from God, but just stating the truth, the hard truth of what I've done, and trying to use words even that are sin. Like I think sometimes to say I looked at pornography, like honestly, like if you get technical, that's not even a sin. Like looking is never a sin. What's the sin? It's lusting. That's the sin. It's treating someone as an object. That's the sin. So again, not to get scrupulous, not to get technical, not to be self-flagellating, not beating yourself up, but simply to state the truth. And then after I did that confession, my mentor just prayed a simple prayer over me of, I think he might even quoted 1 John 1:9. Josh, you've confessed your sin. God is faithful and just, and he forgives you your sin and cleanses you from all unrighteousness. And what that posture did, what the difference that made was it set the focus of the forgiveness on God's great love, his mercy, on the cross of Jesus, on all his action and all his character. And then from that place, I was able to receive, as I experienced that, I was able to receive more deeply the magnitude of his mercy. And I don't know if you're following that equation there, but if I try to raise myself up, then and let's say just psychologically or emotionally, I do that, then the amount of mercy I'm receiving only meets me to the place where I've raised myself up to. But the truth is, I raised myself up with my own thinking about what I'd done. And so the mercy didn't go as deep as I needed it because I tried to meet mercy kind of halfway, so to speak. And likewise, if I downplay the severity of what I've done, then I haven't lowered myself enough, and mercy comes to meet me where I am. But I'm not in the truth, not living in the truth of the reality of how deep the darkness that I've done is. And so instead, what we want to do is we want to open ourselves up to the reality of where we are, what we've done, without excuse, without justification, without trying to lift ourselves up, and invite God to give us mercy there. And as we do that, I think the measure of mercy that we are able to receive, I mean, God's always lavishing mercy on us, but I think it's more our own posture. So we open ourselves to receive the magnitude of mercy that we need. Andrew Comiskey has put it this way. He says, mercy flows to the lowest spot. It's like water. It flows to the lowest place. And so why do we try to elevate ourselves? Do we need less mercy? No, we need more than we know. So let's not try to raise ourselves up or minimize what we've done so that we receive less mercy. Let's be honest about the truth of our sin, sexual or otherwise, so we can receive just huge drafts, huge waves of God's abundant, loving mercy. Lord, apart from you, we are sinful and we have sinned. And Lord, there's nothing that we can do that justifies us even remotely. And so would you grant us your mercy? And Lord, for anyone listening today who's just thirsty for mercy, Lord, help them to lay down the ways they've tried to earn it or reduce their need for it, and help them instead, Lord, to simply confess to you and receive the love, forgiveness, mercy, and grace you have for them. We pray these things in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thanks for listening in. If you find the content of this podcast helpful, make sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That helps other people find the show. And if you'd like to check out more resources to help you in your journey towards becoming more whole, go to regenerationministries.org. Again, I'm Josh Glazer, and we'll see you next time.